Today we are going to talk about the Dragonbane Bestiary from Free League Publishing. This happens to be one of my favorite Dragonbane books because I spend a lot of time with my nose in this particular book. And let me show you its features, to quote someone famous. If you know, you know. All right, first thing, it's a Free League book. And I have to say, the art from cover to cover is some of the most amazing art I have ever seen in a role-playing game book. I cannot be happier with this art. This is probably also a good time to mention that our friends at Free League sent me a free copy of this hardcover bestiary, and thank goodness for that. I really, really appreciate it. Couldn't be happier. So let's talk real quick about, some of the nice people that brought us this book. Obviously, Tomas, Magnus Cedar, Matthias Johnson, Hake, Andreas, Markland. Then you've got the art, which the cover is Johan Egerkrans, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. And the interior art is David Brascala, which, if you're familiar with Free League Publishing, he does a lot of awesome things for them. We're going to talk about the Nightkin first. I do love the Nightkin. Probably some of my favorite kin in the entire game. We'll just go through. You can actually use these as player characters if you wish. If your group is agreeing to it and your GM is cool. Goblins. We do love some goblins around here. Excuse me. Yeah. The only downer with being a Nightkin is the fact that you have sunlight allergy. So if you're in direct sunlight, you take damage. However, they do have a nice heroic ability that's called Resilient. They're a non-monster, so they do not count as a monster in combat if you're running them as a GM. Just a little something to be aware of. So there's goblins. There's hobgoblins, which are kind of the bigger, angrier cousin of the goblin. And I'm sure we're all familiar with those. Ogres. Now, here's one that I actually personally do not recommend as a player character. But if your group is cool with it, you can do it. And, maybe treat it like you would treat like a Goliath in D&D. They are considered large, which means they take up a lot of room on a grid. And like I said, as a player character, they are, in my opinion, probably a little OP. Their heroic ability is Body Slam. Basically, you're playing Andre the Giant, only as a player character in Dragonbane. Orcs, of course, these orcs are kind of the classic orc trope that we're all used to and love from various other role-playing games and fiction and so on and so forth. Of course, Free League also makes Lord of the Rings RPG, and that's groovy. Like they have a lot of familiarity with orcs over there. Now we come to one of my other favorites, which is the rare kin. Okay, all the Nightkin have sunlight allergies. Rare kin are a little different and so lovable, so lovable. First up, cat folk. I know several people have an issue with anthropomorphic cats in role-playing games. Me personally, I love them. I actually made anthropomorphic cats a thing in several of my games. I actually made cat people based on my own cats. So there is a cat folk in my game named Snoopy, which Snoopy may be making an appearance in one of the solo campaigns that I'm working on. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. Centaurs and a base, so they're going to take up that 4x4 square on the space on the square grid. They can drink you under the table, which is kind of a neat. One of the things I wanted to talk about real quick, and on top of the really awesome art, there are 60 total entries in this book. You get a random encounter, which is always a lot of fun, and an adventure seed. So, like, you can have them run into this creature for a day. You can have them run into this creature just briefly on the road or some such. Personally, I like centaurs. So now we're actually into, like, the monsters. And one thing I love about centaurs is, one, their movement is crazy. They can be all over the place. They can drink you under the table, so if you run into a friendly one, that's always fun. You've got all kinds of cool attacks. You've got a random encounter and an adventure seed. And one thing I love about monsters in this book is that you can run them for one short encounter, like on a road, or you can run them as like a full-on like adventure, like for an entire night, one shot, whatever you got. Fairies. Fairies. We'll just move right along. If you've had encounters with the Fae in other games, or even in here, you know, all right. Frog people are a possibility as player characters. Daggerheart, actually, different game, but had kind of made the frog people famous as a player character race. Personally, this is one that I would probably allow as long as I had adventures kind of planned in and around sort of swampy areas, or swampier areas. Harpies, and again, harpies have an attack that just makes me cringe, which is number 6, and I won't spell it out, but they fling poo like monkeys, and it's gross. At least it can be parried. But yeah, ew. The Karkion. Now here's another player character possibility, if your group is cool with it. The only thing I have kind of issues with, and a lot of GMs in other games, and even in this game have issues with, is the fact that they can fly. Not to mention, you have basically hung a giant sign on your character that says, shoot me, shoot me, shoot me, if the enemies have any kind of ranged weapons whatsoever, tactically speaking. Now, non-tactically speaking and character speaking, yeah, they're awesome. Like, I would totally play one of these if my GM was cool with it, because they're basically a flying cat person. And the other thing I should probably mention, and has been mentioned in other reviews by other people, is that you get kind of the on-the-ground character view from the various, or I should say, of the various character types and creature types from a character point of view. Because basically this is from the point of view of someone who went around and interviewed members or encountered, members of these various monster groups and NPCs and stuff. Lizard people. Yeah, I've been waiting to say that. Lizard people, if you know, you know. Love you, Hecklefish. Not that he'll see that. But anyway, and again, the random encounters with this are hilarious. In the Adventure Seed. You can play these as player characters. I love the first names on this. Cluck, hiss, hiss. Click, gersh, cluck. What's your name? Personally, I have 2 versions of lizard people in my game. The regular kind that you kind of see here, and reptilians, which are like the larger lizard people cousin that are non-player characters and would never be player characters. These are more like geckos, actually, if we're being honest. But they do have some pretty cool NPC types, and they are a player character race possibility if your group is cool with it. Mermaids, I don't think I need to explain a whole lot there. I mean, you find them at sea, just like any other game, any other situation. Minotaurs! Oh, yeah. Ferocity, too, but man, that Horn Rush. The Horn Rush, 2d8 piercing, and knockdown. By the way, if I haven't mentioned it, I make a lot of monsters, usually every week on my blog. You can go check that out. I'll leave a link below. Naiads, which is something you don't get in every game. I've obviously played my way through a lot of fantasy monster books, manuals, bestiaries, whatever you want to call them, and yeah, this is one you don't see every day. Satyrs. I don't know what to say about satyrs. It's kind of your standard pan, like Shakespearean pan flute playing, sort of sad, morose at times, but also kind of like party animals when they want to be. They tend to be pretty cheerful. A satyr who does not get to rejoice with friends every day quickly falls into melancholy. So yeah, they can get kind of morose if they're not careful. They are a player character available kin, and they can actually like kind of do bardic inspiration if you're familiar with that other game. So yeah, that's satyrs. Swan Maidens, again, something you don't get every day, is treated like a monster here, so you don't get to play them as a character. They're shapeshifters. Obviously, they can turn into a swan and back. Honestly, this reminds me of the good old 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons days, where we had Swan Maidens in that game. But yeah, Swan Maidens are awesome. Treekin, and again, this is one you don't see every day. Vulnerable to fire. But they take they have resistance against piercing and bludgeoning weapons, because obviously you're trying to stab or beat a tree with a club. And if you've ever tried that, it doesn't really do much. And please don't go try that, because trees are beautiful and we love trees. But yeah, treekin. So much like the Ents in Lord of the Rings. All right, now we're into the insectoids, the bugaboo kin. And you've got the ant people. I love how he's walking his dog. Not really something you can play as a character, but they are fun to mess around with. Beetlekin. Yeah, I'm so tempted to have one of these named Beetlejuice. Spiderkin. These are actually one of my favorite kin / monsters because I've got a bunch of aerial encounters that I worked on, or that I mentioned in one of my blog entries about, creatures building civilizations in the clouds. Spiderkin that can build an entire web society between two mountains and have this just massive cocoon of spiderkin. I think that'd be a lot of fun. And then there's also the actual official random encounter and adventure seed, which are all good. All right, now we're into one of the other best entries in Dragonbane, which are trolls. You've got the cave troll. Sunlight allergy, so if they spend too much time in direct light, they start taking damage. The idea, obviously, would be for them to be more nocturnal, or at least out in the dusk, as opposed to direct sunlight. They can be in sunlight as long as they've got cloud cover and dense tree cover and things like that, and clothing. But they regenerate d6 hit points per turn in combat, which makes them really tough to kill. And they eat treasure. Sad. But yeah, cave trolls. So kind of a Lord of the Rings tip of the hat there, maybe. Forest trolls, which are one of my favorite versions of said troll. And again, they get to do a lot of the stuff that we're used to, trolls doing. They smell terrible. Hey, it makes it easier to find them. They can cast illusions, which is something you don't see in a lot of games. And, of course, the sunlight allergy. They tend to charge headlong into things. But yeah, forest trolls. And then, my other favorite, in fact, I'm working on an entire supplement based on these guys. The mountain troll. Sunlight allergy, strangely enough. Mountain troll's blood is the healing blood, and basically they've got this sap that sort of heals things in themselves. Of course, they actually heal an entire d8 per turn in combat as long as they're not at 0. The thing I love about mountain trolls is memories of ages past, and this is something I like I said, I'm developing an entire supplement based on this idea. They have a skill 18 in languages and myths and legends, which means they can train characters up if you get a chance to do so. They also get to cast spells, magic tricks specifically, and they get to cast divination, farsight, longstrider, and scrying, which, those are all basically your psychic, know things at a distance, ESP type spells. And the staff has 12 willpower points, which, if you're familiar with Dragonbane, that's awesome as magic items go. Now the downer is it's bound to the mountain troll, so if the troll should happen to die, then yeah, the staff is toast. Bummer. But very cool. Mountain trolls are actually friendlier, I guess would be the best way to put it. They're not openly hostile like the cave troll and the forest troll. The cave troll and the forest troll will eat you on general principle. The mountain trolls will actually stop and theoretically talk to you if you're not hostile. They're cool. Of course, they probably get mistaken for their cousins sometimes, which is not cool. But like I said, I have plans for a mountain troll adventure, actually a series of encounters that'll be coming out on ttrpg here one of these days. I love mountain trolls. I love the concept. They did such an awesome job with this. The trolls in this are more like what were the trolls in a game called Earth Dawn, if you're familiar with Earth Dawn, where they are more player character friendly, I guess. Or, well, in Earth Dawn they were actually player characters, but in here they are wise. They are casters. They do all kinds of fun stuff. Moving right along to giants. Giants, forest giant. I just love this art. This reminds me so much of like the OG Lord of the Rings cartoons almost, with just the way they drew the giant here. You can see a bear for scale. And again, giants in this game are somewhat similar to other games, except in here, like, the forest giants are friends with animals, and they blend in the trees. They can call upon animals to aid them. They can also bash you over the head with a tree trunk if they want to. Kind of your standard, giant type attacks. They throw stuff, they hit you with things. They can cast snaring roots. And yeah, just kind of a fun little encounter there. Mountain giants, again, if you're familiar with giants in other games, this is kind of your standard stone giant, other than their eyesight's a little sketchy. You could actually do one as a one-eyed cyclops if you really wanted to. Sea giant, again, reminds me a lot, the artwork even on this reminds me a lot of the World of Warcraft sea giants. Titans, which are kind of the overgiant giant. They're like really big giants. They hibernate. They are fairly resistant to non-magical attacks. They have a shield on top of everything else. Yeah, you can hear them coming because they're huge. And armor 6 is nothing to toy around with in Dragonbane, if you're familiar. Not to mention 64 hit points, so you're going to be hitting this thing all day long, and it's just going to keep coming. Not recommended for novice adventurers, obviously. Beasts. Now we're getting into some fun stuff, because I make a lot of beasts when I make monsters. You've got the Basilisk, which is one of my favorites. Really awesome attack spread on this guy. Because, as you know, Dragonbane monsters roll on a d6 table to see what they're going to do for an attack. Or the GM can just choose, but I prefer to roll whenever I can. They hit automatically. So combat economy makes characters have to make really, really smart choices. Now, the funny thing about the Basilisk here is they're afraid of chickens, which is funny because they kind of look like chickens. But yeah, I absolutely just adore the Basilisk in this game. They've kind of gotten away from the lizard style Basilisk. It's more of a bird here. And yeah, just one of my absolute favorite creature types. And rolling right along. Yes, I am going page by page. The Brook Horse. This is a unique creature between here and, I believe, Vaesen. I believe. And actually, I think this book originated, or the Brook Horse originated in the Vaesen book. But yeah, very cool. The Caledon, that's another unique monster to Dragonbane. It's kind of a fell boar, I guess, would be the best comparison I have if you've played World of Warcraft. Love the art for this one. The Chimera, and again, pretty standard. You've got the lion, the goat, and the snake. Personally, I like the dragon-headed version, like the three-headed version with the dragon. There are so many Chimera variants, and honestly, if I was going to do a monster book, I think one of my priorities would be to do like a pile of Chimera variants where basically you've got a chart where you roll for each of the three heads, which of course gives you different abilities depending on what they get and what you roll and so on and so forth. But the way they've done it in here is really cool. Because you've usually got like an individual attack, a claw attack, the lion head, the goat head, the snake head, and then everybody at the same time. Which, again, if you're familiar with Dragonbane combat, that is not to be taken lightly. That's a lot of damage dumped in one place at one time, and done. Plus, you've also got the will roll to resist fear, the mighty fear table, and this is one creature that deserves that. Giant amoeba. I have to say, this is probably one of the most dreadful creatures in the game, if we're being honest. They don't have puddings or slimes or that gelatinous blob from that other game, but we have giant amoebas. It keeps your dungeon clean. Okay, giant octopus. Kind of speaks for itself. I think we've all seen aquatic encounters with giant octopuses, at least if you've been role-playing for any length of time. Giant spiders, pretty self-explanatory. Griffins, again, I think we've all seen griffins in various games, and we have a pretty good idea what they're all about. Hippogriff, same kind of thing. Personally, I think these would make for really sweet mounts if you could actually tame one. Good luck with that. Anyway, the Hydra, of course, cool stuff. Poison spit. They don't breathe fire in this one, or well, actually, they've got toxic breath. I guess that's not quite the same thing, but poison. Poison in Dragonbane is really underrated in my opinion. Like, I personally think it's an awesome attack type. If I was gonna do a monster book of my own, I think one of the first things I would do is pull in the concepts from Dungeons and Dragons, like the Cryo Hydra and the Pyro Hydra and stuff like that. But really well written here. D3+1 heads. If you reduce a head to 0 hit points, actually each head has 10 hit points. If you obviously take out all of the heads, it's done. So yeah, but good stuff. Manticore, again, pretty standard. This is actually in the Dragonbane core rules as well. Pretty standard, like, large monster encounter. I base a lot of things off of this creature just because it's got really solid statistics all the way around. It's got really good attacks. And yeah, a lot of fun. Medusa, again, if you're familiar with Greek mythology or if you're familiar with the various other games that use Medusa, absolutely terrifying to run into in Dragonbane just because you don't have that many hit points. And getting turned to stone really sucks, which they can do, Petrifying Gaze. And that's just an ability. That's just like you run into it and it has this. That's not even on the attack table. That's just, it has this. So, yeah. Yeah, Pegasus, again, Greek mythology, pretty standard to a lot of games, good stuff. Rock, smell what the rock is cooking, baby. I just love the art for this. It is absolutely incredible that they've done this particular piece of art. It can drop rocks on your head. It flies, obviously. Pretty standard huge bird attacks. 80 hit points. Yeah, not to be taken lightly. Again, you're talking probably an entire experienced party that knows what they're doing. If a bunch of amateurs run into this thing, I think run is the operative word. Yes, indeed. Sea serpents. Now, this kind of is where we start seeing some of that Norse heritage from Free League Publishing. You've got kind of the standard sea serpent from Norse mythology. Loves the taste of blood. Can crush, constrict, do all that really terrible stuff, pull people underwater. It can be normal, large, or huge sized, 18 movement, hit points depending on the size. Ferocity too, and for those not familiar with Dragonbane as much, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but ferocity is basically the number of attacks they have per turn, or per round rather, and how many initiative cards they get to draw. With 2 ferocity, which is most monsters, it gives you the options of attack and maybe an evade. Now, something this large, I probably wouldn't, unless you run into a normal sized one, I probably wouldn't try to evade if I was a GM, but like any other time, yeah, awesome sauce. All right, the werewolf. Again, pretty standard shapeshifter. Has lycanthropy as a curse, so obviously if you get bitten by said, you might turn into one, and then you get to hand over your character sheet to the GM, unless your GM is feeling really generous. Warg, again, kind of your standard dire wolf, as seen in other games. Sneaking past them is really tough, not to be taken lightly. They have had wargs as a mount for goblins and hobgoblins. Personally, I think if a player character should happen to go out of his way, like a hunter should happen to go out of his way to tame one, then yeah, you could probably have it as a mount, and we'd have to tweak the stats a little bit. Now we're to one of my favorites. Undead. So we got ghosts. Ghosts, like, I tend to run ghosts as a little more friendly. Like, they don't just instantly, they don't just stop and attack. There is an ability or a note in a lot of stat blocks that says persuadable. So, like, they can be talked to. I mean, yes, you do this with a Bane on the persuasion roll for ghosts. But, like I said, the way I personally run them, they're a little friendlier. They've usually got a purpose. Yes, they're probably going to try to scare you off originally at first, but then as you kind of get further into the ghost encounter, if you spend your time on it, ghosts can be appeased and even returned to the proper spirit world afterlife that they should have gone to, as opposed to being a ghost. So there's that. Ghouls. Again, pretty standard fare here. They eat flesh. Yuck. They're nocturnal. Thank goodness for that. Living Dead. Now, here's where we take a drastic turn from your standard role-playing game zombie, and we go straight to Living Dead. And if you're familiar with Free League Publishing, they also make Walking Dead Universe RPG. This is kind of sort of a version of that, and they have the disease, so they have the zombie virus. Obviously, headshots take them out, neck shots take them out. If you are attacked, bitten, you can contract the zombie virus. I have taken advantage of this in some of my world building. I think they are just one of the most awesome undead types there is. And of course, if you have an animist, they can purge or banish, or you can just take them down with spells or fire or magic items. Mummies, again, pretty standard Egyptian monster mummy type lore here. Good stuff. Skeletons. Of course, everybody's favorite undead, right? Right. You can't play one as a character. They're immune to fear and persuasion. Piercing damage is halved, just like you see in some other games. And, yeah, longsword, shield, or archers. If you've ever seen that old Harryhausen movie, Jason and the Argonauts, you're kind of familiar with skeletons with bows and stuff. It's really cool. I personally, this is like, I mean, yeah, it's sort of the default undead, but it's also one of my favorite types. One of my favorite monsters, period. Vampires. I don't know what to say more about vampires than has already been said like 1,000 times over in other games. Obviously, you can't play as a vampire in Dragonbane, nor would you want to. But they take damage from silver, magic, and spells. Everything else is halved. Sunlight vulnerability, way more so than the night can. They can transform. They're immortal, so on and so forth. We do not get the Lich. Spoilers, we do not get the Lich in Dragonbane because one of the greatest villains who is practically a god in Dragonbane happens to be a Lich. And to my knowledge, I've never seen stats on him, which hopefully someday. Wights are cool. That's WIGHT for those listening, not the other kind. Because I don't want to get in trouble with anybody on YouTube here. Their attacks are pretty cool. They don't level drain because there's no levels in Dragonbane 2 drain. But crippling cold. Basically, it's a death chill. Make an evade or you get paralyzed. Plus, they also have power attack, which is really gnarly. Kind of the same as other games, but not really. I like how they've managed to make it just different enough to make them interesting. Will-O-Wisp, again, kind of your standard folklore fare Will-O-Wisp. Still good. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, they are awesome sauce. Dragons. Now, the thing about Dragonbane, despite the fact that it's literally in the name twice over, so it's Drakkar Ocdemoner, so dragons and demons, or it's Dragonbane, which here in the States would mean that, you know, you're basically taking them on. I don't know. I mean, yes, they're kind of authoritarian, and no, they're not friendly necessarily, although I kind of treat them as friendlier, like they're friendlier than demons, at least. I mean, that's a bonus, right? Friendlier than demons? Yeah, I think so. You got your hatchling. Obviously, everybody wants to find the dragon egg and have it hatch and be a cute little baby dragon that they raise until the adventure obviously dies and the dragon keeps living for the next several centuries. Yeah, but baby dragons are cool. Baby dragon. The young dragon. Now we're getting a little bigger, and these are the kind of the fun ones to run into because they aren't necessarily built up. They have about the attitude of an adult human, They've started to hoard gold and gems and stuff, but they're not all the way there yet. Armor 4, which is not to be taken lightly. Obviously, they fly. 60 hit points is a lot for Dragonbane, and that's a young dragon. And, I mean, the breath weapon on these guys only does a cone 6 meters long, whose width is... any given point is equal to the distance from the dragon's mouth. Anybody that gets hit with the flames, it takes 2d10 fire damage, which means flammables are set ablaze on top of everything else, and armor has no effect. So, yeah, we're talking more of the lizard trope, the giant flying suitcase that hoots fire on stuff. Then we get into the adult dragon. We're all familiar with the adult dragon from the Dragonbane book. 24 meters in around. That's ridiculous. That's a lot of movement for those who aren't familiar with Dragonbane. That's basically 12 squares on the map. They're huge. So, I mean, they take up a 4x4 area. I think I misspoke earlier. Large creatures only take up a 2x2 area. But yeah, they're big, nasty, fire-breathing, make a fear check type of stuff. Yeah. The Ancient Dragon, now I love this. I'm going to try to see if I can zoom in a little bit on this artwork. We have this group of adventurers down here walking by what they think is a mountain, right? Mountain. Why does that mountain have an eyeball? You know, it's kind of like one of those things you see online where it's like, if you see a pair of people hugging, it's this, and if you see a hippopotamus, it's this, and of course the picture is actually a dragon in this case. All right, demons. Now we come to the other part of Drakkar Octeminer, which is the demons. Again, one of my favorite baddies to play around with because good times. You know, it's kind of showing my my roots here a little bit, maybe. The Blood Demon, which, I mean, could honestly be mistaken for a vampire or a Karkion, depending. They have undead minions. Awesome sauce. They can be heard because of their heartbeat, which I think is kind of fun. They fly, obviously, not something you want to run into. Actually, demons in general in this game, if you're playing them out of the core book, there's like a lot of random options. If you're playing them out of the bestiary here, they are, depending on which one you've got, they are just plain vicious. Acid for blood on the Chaos Demon. Cool. Unnatural aura, which means like vegetation around them rots or withers. They fly like some of the other demons do, which not to be underestimated. The Fire Demon. They get to summon imps. Not to mention the fact that they're on fire. Dude, your head is on fire. If you know, you know. Fire damage. They're vulnerable to water, thank goodness. So, like, anytime they get hit with water-based magic or a bucket of water or anything like that, they take a little bit of extra, which is nice. With all that going on, you kind of need to. You need to have some kind of advantage. Here's one of the strangest things in Dragonbane that just absolutely boggles my mind because they've taken it so far from its roots of being sort of a... If you're familiar with Hebrew folklore, at all, the golem should sound familiar, but they have taken that and turned it like 180 degrees, and golems in Dragonbane are actually considered to be part of the demon category. When they get down to 0 hit points, they explode. But the good news is they have no internal organs. Rolling a dragon in melee does basically nothing. Rolling a dragon in missile fire does basically nothing. Not that it would really help you anyway, because armor 6. Their attacks are crazy huge, awesome, good. They're a large creature, and again, the artwork for this is so unique to Dragonbane. I don't know if it's focusing very well on that, but yeah, the art for this is just so very Dragonbane. Like, I just love it. And again, like I said, I was not expecting that in the demon category. Guardian demons are, I don't want to say they're like foot troops, but they're like a little less powerful as far as demons go. They're normal sized. 14 movement, still pretty awesome. 28 hit points. They can smell things. It's a little harder to get by them. Obviously, Guardian Demon. It's kind of in the name. They have really decent attacks, including a paralyzing spear thrust. That is nothing to take lightly. They can entangle. They can teleport. Teleport. I mean, ask any player that's run into like one of my baddies that can teleport, and they'll tell you it's just the absolutely most painful thing ever. Shadow Demon. Now, again, they've kind of gotten away from that other game that has shadow demons in it. I personally think the shadow demons in here are amazing. They're large. Obviously, they have the sunlight allergy because of what they are made of. They're telepathic. At least they can read surface thoughts. They don't have a solid form, so they're like ghosts. Yeah, good luck hitting them with anything but magic. Hopefully, by the time you run into one of these guys, you've got an animist in the group who can cast banish or purge, or you've got magic items that can cast banish or purge, or just plain do extra, like, have boons to attack versus, hopefully. Because, yeah, they're nasty. And this is also one of my absolute favorite monsters to use as, like, kind of a... And I realize I'm stealing this from the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon from back in the day, but I like these as kind of a henchman or like a spy for the big bad whatever in my game, because shadow demons can, you know, obviously they're not tangible, so they can kind of slip through, you know, and they can spy on people and they can do all kinds of other sneaky ninja type shadow stuff. And that brings us to the end. Now, don't get me wrong, like, and I'm glad they indexed this. Not that it really, you need to, but unlike other monster books, they did not put things in any kind of alphabetical order. So if you're needing to look something up in a hurry and you don't have the PDF handy, they put an index in the book, and thank goodness for that. Thank you, Free League Publishing. And again, I'd like to thank Free League Publishing for sending me a copy of this book. This has been just an absolute pleasure to own, pleasure to review. There's our friend, the Blood Demon, on the back. And yeah, just good stuff. As far as the actual monsters themselves go, kind of basic, which is fine. You know, it's what I would expect from a first book. Now, I happen to know for a fact in Sweden, where this comes from, Fria Ligan was nice enough to create a Monsterboken 2, which is the second, basically it'd be the second bestiary. I have asked Free League. I've asked for interviews with Free League. I have yet to receive one, but hey, hopefully someday. About getting a second monster book. I've asked that question on the forums and several other places, and I have not gotten an answer yet. So there's still hope. They're doing Trudvang, and I know there's a bestiary for Trudvang, which is going to be pretty cool. You know, so maybe that's where the Monsterboken 2 comes in. I don't know. They haven't really said as far as contents yet, because we're not even up to the Kickstarter yet. But hey, soon. You know, and hey, it's been absolutely fabulous. If you like what I do here, maybe do all that YouTube stuff of, you know, like, subscribe, share, send one to your grandmother, whatever you need to do, get the word out. Keep it real. Do what brings you the most joy, as long as it doesn't bring harm to anyone else. And I'll see you in the next one.